are small businesses. I mean, where are you ever going to recoup that investment? Like, never. So the government said, not a problem. We'll pay it for you. And in exchange for that, you just have to give us all the data. And so each year, starting in 2010, which of course was when Obamacare came into being, by 2012, they installed more than 500,000 physicians across the country had bought into the system, and they were teaching them how to use the electronic medical records. That each year, they had to add a few more things, a few more boxes that needed to be checked, and that data gone off to the government. And in 2016, they added the box that needed to be checked, was your immunization status. And that goes into what's called the information, the immunization information system, or the local, regional, and district vaccine registry. And your information goes into this registry to always be there. And the intention of these registries are to be cradle to grave tracking of your vaccination status. The National Adult Vaccine Plan was released in February of 2015. And at the same time, they introduced an implementation plan. And some of the things that have been burbling around in the background that haven't come to the forefront yet in terms of implementation are, if you're not fully vaccinated, will you be able to travel? Will you be able to renew your driver's license? Will you be able to go to a public place like a football game or a basketball game? Will you be able to go to a grocery store unless you can show that you are fully vaccinated? That's the type of plan that's coming down the road. And I just see these people as just needle-wheeling maniacs that every single person needs to be injected with every possible vaccine. And the adult vaccination plan actually has language in it that says that they want adults to demand and request their vaccines, and if they haven't demanded and requested them, that they will be offered to them. They have financial incentives to give it, and it is to be required for every vaccine that's currently on the market and every vaccine in the future. And we know there are at least 140 vaccines in the developmental pipeline. When a lot of people listen to the Truth About Vaccines seminar, or they listen to talks about vaccines, they say, well, my kids are past that. You know, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have to make that decision. Or, you know, my kids are having grandkids and they don't ever listen to me anyways. But here's the thing. Many of these vaccines that are now in development are headed directly towards adolescents and adults. And the adult vaccination plan is a 5-year escalated, ramped up system to get people on board by 2020 for the implementation of the Healthy People 2020 guidelines that have become goals.
For those that are watching, Sherry, what exactly is Healthy People 2020?
It actually started in 1990 when the Surgeon General came forth and worked with the Department of Health at that time, and they created what was called the Healthy People Guidelines for 1990. And what they looked at is with the health of our overall society, and they were laudable goals. They were looking at things like smoking cessation and wearing motorcycle helmets and obesity and clean water. And so they set up goals to go from 1990 to 2000 and to see where we could get. And so every decade they have established these new goals. So there was goals from 2000 to 2010, and then in 2010 they created the goals to be set up for 2020. And so the difference is that the original goals in 1990, there were 15 goals and about 225 objectives. In the Healthy People 2020 guidelines, there are 44 goals and 1,200 objectives to look at every single corner of our health and every single corner of our life. And there's a sector in there for vaccines that they want to have 90% of the population vaccinated with flu shots, DPT shots, MMR, and all of these were set up initially to be guidelines, but they have become goals. And the goals now, one of the steps in the goals is to take away your right to refuse. So what Healthy People 2020 is supposed to do is it's supposed to get everybody vaccinated and get everybody on board and get all the funding for adults and adolescents. And how this all kind of came about at the same time as we developed the Healthy People 2020 guidelines, it started in 2010. In 2010, this was declared the decade of vaccines. And in 2010, the Gates Foundation put up $10 million to start this to be the decade of vaccines. And within this decade of vaccines from 2010 to 2020, in these Healthy People guidelines, we need to have electronic medical records and tracking. We need to take away people's right to refuse. We need to ramp up all of these guidelines and turn them into goals. And they are well on their way. I mean, that's really I mean, we're at 2017. We only have 3 years left for people to become really aware of this and get involved in not allowing this to happen in the future.
So this is something that literally affects everyone that's watching this program.
Everyone, not here and around the world, because in 2000, the Gates Foundation funded an organization called Gavi, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccination and Immunization. They started that organization with a donation of $750 million. Since that time, they have invested $6.8 billion into vaccinating the world.
Dr. Tenpenny mentioned forced vaccines for adults several times. I've read the literature, and it certainly does appear that one of the purposes of the Healthy People 2020 initiative is to vaccinate all adults as well as children and to eliminate their choice, to eliminate their right to refuse. These are fundamental rights.
To me, there is no more fundamental right in the U.S. than what we put in our body. Like, we have fundamental rights to property and free speech. But if we don't have a fundamental right to what goes in our body, when nobody else is responsible for the consequences, nobody's taking liability, and we are going to be stuck financially and mentally and emotionally, physically with those repercussions, what more fundamental right do we have than what goes in our body? And I think right now our founding fathers are rolling over in their graves, because if we have that medical right taken away from us, I mean, what good are any other rights? To me, this is the most important conversation right now. We have to keep our rights and our choice as to what goes into our body.
After I came out of med school, I vaccinated thousands of children, and it's one of my biggest regrets in life that I did that, because I didn't know any better, and I trusted them, blindly trusted them, that they were telling the truth. And many physicians were like me. They believe that they're being told the truth. They don't have the time, effort, or energy or resources to carefully examine it themselves. But if they did, they would reach inevitably, if they were objective, rational, that there's no other conclusion that you could reach. There's some serious potential problems here that have to be seriously examined, and you have to weigh the evidence. And in some cases, if you objectively you've done your due diligence, and you reach a conclusion you want to vaccinate, then it's fine. I think it should be a choice, but it shouldn't be forced on anyone.
Mandatory vaccination, forced vaccination, no exceptions, no exemptions, vaccine policies and laws are completely contrary to the founding principles of the United States of America. I do not believe Americans, if they really understand what is happening here, will stand for it. I believe that Americans who understand the truth about how many people are being hurt by vaccines will stand up and fight for their freedom.
As an attorney, Allison, you did say that's assault and battery when they take the child and force a vaccine.
Against parents' will, against the child's will. You are physically, it's a physical touching of another without their consent. That's assault. That's battery. The anticipation of that battery is actually assault.
Have you seen the government or the CPS try to step in to parents that would not vaccinate?
Oh, absolutely. There have been forced vaccinations. I mean, downright forced vaccinations, where they will come and remove the child and take custody of the child legally and bring that child so-called up to standard or code of where that child is supposed to be. And it's mandated by the state under the guise of the child is in a public school. Well, guess what? A child has a fundamental right to a free public education. So you can't take one fundamental right, which is the right not to be vaccinated, and conjoin and take away another fundamental right, which is to a free public education. But that's what's happening. The state is saying, if you're going to have your child in, and not only a public school, a private school. Well, what's going on with that? So the medical exemptions, the religious exemptions, the personal belief exemptions, that's all going out the window. So there's a push to have a one set frame of mind of how all children need to be, based on scientific data that is not conclusive, okay? And so, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to argue that position. What I do know is that it is assault and battery to mandatorily give a child a permanent vaccination that will change the course of his or her life on a basis where the court takes the child over for a temporary period of time. And now here you are, I'm going to give you back now a damaged child. You gave me a whole child, I'm going to give you back a damaged child. And then the state wants to say, oh, well, hands off. Oh, now your child is thrown into autism? Oh, well.
This is where it's all headed. Governments working in conspiracy with vaccine manufacturers to commit acts of extreme violence against families that do not obediently accept vaccine interventions. This is a war against humanity. This is scientific totalitarianism. This is vaccine violence. And it is the ultimate extension of bad medicine to administer and enforce medicine at gunpoint. That's what this family is going through, and that is where it's all headed in California, across the United States, and everywhere around the world if we don't change.
If we do not have the right to decide what we do or don't allow in our body, especially when that which we're talking about has been declared unavoidably unsafe by the United States Supreme Court in 2011, which means inherently dangerous. When we don't have the right to decide whether or not we want to allow 70 plus dangerous, inherently dangerous products into our children or ourselves, then what meaningful rights do we have left?
I don't know about other countries of the world, but in the United States, we cherish our fundamental rights, which include freedom of speech and freedom of choice when it comes to medical procedures and our fundamental freedom of thought. Nobody can tell us what to think.
When people don't want you to think, when they only want you to believe and trust what they say and obey the orders that they give, they're not going to want you to be educated. They're not going to want you to ask questions. They're not going to want to have to answer the questions that you ask. This is a very authoritarian, paternalistic attitude that pediatricians and all of those who are giving vaccines, those who are making policy for vaccines, are trying to foist upon us. And, you know, in America, we don't have a tradition of particularly liking authoritarian type approach. In America, we're used to having the freedom of speech, freedom of thought, the ability to follow our conscience, the ability to hold religious beliefs. We're not a society that is used to being told what we can think and what we can do.
Every story about kids who've been vaccine injured, the parents almost always state, I didn't want to do it. I knew it was wrong. I had this gut feeling, but my doctor bullied me into doing it.
Many pediatricians in the United States will kick families out of their practice if they choose not to vaccinate. So how can you have informed consent if you choose not to vaccinate, you're told you cannot be my patient anymore, I will not see your family?
The scenario that Dr. Jennifer Margulis just described is exactly what happened to my wife Charlene upon the birth of our first daughter, Brianna.
We vaccinated Brianna, and at her 9-month visit, the well visit, I gave her over to the doctors to get her vaccinated, her routine vaccinations. And this was back in 2001. She was born in 2000, of course. And so when they took her and vaccinated her, I took her home, and I just remember, you remember, she was covered from head to toe with a terrible rash, and it was just, it was awful, and I didn't know what was wrong with her. And I remember bringing her into the pediatrician asking, well, I don't know what's wrong. And they said, oh, no big deal, that's just eczema, it happens all the time, just put some nice lotion on there and she'll be fine. And then shortly after that, I noticed she was just starting to be very verbal with ba, 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 and that just stopped. And I was so alarmed, and I was so in tune with her as her mother. that I knew something went south, something was wrong. And I was so concerned, and so I was telling the pediatrician my concerns in Pittsburgh, and it was a woman, and she was so sympathetic, and I felt like she really cared, and she listened, and she would just be sympathetic to my concerns. And then one day she was just gone. She quit the practice, and she had a family, and she was going to take care of her family, and so a young man took over the practice. And so I continued the conversation with him just as I was with this nice woman. And this man was completely different. When I told him my concern about the MMR specifically because of the symptoms we were seeing with Brianna, her regression in her speech and even her movements were regressing. And I just will never forget his smug, condescending attitude when I verbalized these concerns. I just assumed that he would be akin to this woman that was sympathetic, but he just put his nose in the air and said, "You can